Betrayal doesn't begin with shouting, it begins with silence. The kind that coils between glances, that lingers after excuses, that erodes trust grain by grain until it finally shatters. My name is Claire Hartman, 32 years old. I was raised in a family where appearances mattered more than truth, where perfection was rehearsed like a script. For years I believed I understood my role, dutiful daughter, loyal sister, the one who held her composure while everyone else fractured. I was wrong. When the seam split on my grandmother's blue dress, a folded letter slid into my palm, 3 sentences that turned my family into strangers. I told myself to breathe, but the last line said, "Asterisk, I took you." Asterisk. I was supposed to be choosing a gown for the Hartman Hope Fund Gala, not collapsing onto a cold closet floor with a stranger's handwriting blistering my skin. The dress smelled like lavender and old applause. Grandma wore it the night she raised $1 million in 10 minutes, but that wasn't why my hand shook now. Because whoever wrote this letter signed it with a single initial, M. And in our house, M meant Margaret, my mother, but I wasn't ready to believe that yet. 5 minutes, Claire. A stylist called from the hall, cheerful and oblivious. I tucked the letter back into the torn seam and stood slowly, too aware of my reflection. Calm hair, careful makeup, brittle smile. I'd practiced this face for years. Weddings, the day my ex left, the day my sister announced her engagement to him, so I wore it again. But the letter had lit a fuse I couldn't see the end of yet. But the most shocking part wasn't the signature, it was the missing second page that someone had ripped out. Downstairs, glass chimed against glass, and a dozen florists argued with a dozen planners over centerpieces shaped like promises. Our family's charity looked perfect from the outside. It always did. My mother enforced perfection like a law with no appeal process. She stood by the staircase, sleek hair, steel eyes, signing a delivery slip with the same initial that was burning in my pocket. M. If she noticed the way I watched her hand, she didn't show it yet. "Darling, you're late," she said. "Try not to drip nervous energy onto the donors." "I'll keep my emotions indoors," I said, soft enough to sound harmless. She smiled, the way a blade smiles. "Be a dear and find Sophie." She ran off to the terrace. Again. Of course she had, because whenever it mattered, my sister slipped somewhere the air was thinner. I found her leaning on the balcony rail, looking over a city that didn't care what we named our galas. Her phone lay face down beside a flute of champagne she wasn't drinking. "You look like you ate a secret," she said, not turning. "And you sound like you're ready to serve one. Relax. Tonight is about Dad." She tapped the rail once. "He wants us to be the us." I almost laughed. Us had been a bruise for a long time. A triangle with a missing side. "Sophie didn't take Daniel to hurt me," she said. "She just couldn't resist not being second." The night she told me, she cried into my hair. The night she wore his ring, she squeezed my hand so hard it went numb. I told myself I forgave her, because forgiveness was lighter to carry, but lighter things still cut when the wind changed. But what if Sophie wasn't the thief I thought? What if she'd been covering a theft much older? "Dad's speech," I said. "He wrote it last night." Sophie nodded. "He keeps reopening and closing the same file, like a heartbeat that won't choose a rhythm." I looked through the glass doors at our father, trying on a tuxedo smile he didn't have energy for. His cheeks looked hollow, like something had been excavated behind them. I'd noticed the tremor in his hand last week and decided not to make it a story yet. Our family was already a library of stories. I didn't think we could survive another. I almost told Sophie about the letter then. But when she finally met my eyes, the old apology flooded them, and I hated that I could still be moved by how sorry she was. So I chose a smaller truth. "Do you ever feel like we're cast in a play someone else wrote?" I asked. She exhaled. "Every scene. And what if the director is standing in the wings, changing the lines?" I added. She flinched, just slightly. Before she could answer, my phone buzzed. A blocked number. I let it ring out. The second it stopped, a text appeared. Asterisk, check the lining. Asterisk, my fingers went numb. I'd already checked the lining, but only of the skirt. If there was something hidden, it meant someone had hidden it from me, or from me. I excused myself, sprinted back upstairs, and locked the closet door. I turned the blue dress inside out, then slid my hand along the bodice seam. A rough stitch snagged my nail. I tugged carefully until something thin and papery crinkled free, a hospital bracelet, the kind with letters rubbed thin by time. Baby girl. Har, the rest was smudged. The date was 20-something years ago, the same week I was born. My stomach fell through the floor. The bracelet was safety pinned to a second note, only 2 words. Asterisk asked Teresa. Asterisk Teresa Alvarez had been our housekeeper when I was little. She taught me to braid my hair and to hide cookies from my mother's inspections. One day she left. My mother said she married and moved. I never asked where. I never asked why. Downstairs, a string quartet began to rehearse the kind of expensive sadness rich people find tasteful. I pressed the bracelet against my palm, trying to memorize the shape of a truth I couldn't see yet. If Teresa knew something, why had she hidden clues in a dress only I would open? And why the anonymous text now, like a hand reaching out from under a closed door? But the real question wasn't who wanted me to find the truth. It was who needed me not to. I tucked the bracelet and the note back into the dress and slipped into a gown the color of unspoken apologies. When I emerged, the house had shifted into performance mode. Caterers formed silent rivers, volunteers took up their postures, and my mother orchestrated it all with a finger raised like a conductor. When she saw me, that finger didn't lower. "You're wearing that," she said. "Fine. Your posture will do most of the work." Then a softer tone. "Try to celebrate your father tonight." She glanced toward him, and her expression cracked, barely, before healing over. My mother loved us, I knew that. She just preferred it to look like management. "Of course," I said. "He deserves it." Her gaze landed, for a heartbeat, on the thin silver chain at my neck, the one Teresa had given me when I turned 9. "I thought you'd lost that," she murmured, as if to herself. "I thought so too," I said. I hadn't. I'd only forgotten to look. As guests arrived, cameras flashed and names drifted across the foyer like perfume. Daniel appeared at the edge of a conversation I didn't want to join, his hand warm on Sophie's back. He looked at me the way people look at closed doors they remember from another life. I nodded at both of them, as if I had always preferred a balcony seat to a front row. A donor blustered about tax receipts. A councilwoman kissed my mother's cheek and forgot her name mid-sentence. Richard, Dad, leaned on the banister and smiled at every human like they were a reason to keep breathing. I watched my family move in perfect choreography and felt the letter burning against my ribs. I should wait, I told myself. I should collect proof. I should not rip the night open with my bare hands. I should wait, but the bracelet's date kept pulsing in my head like a second heartbeat. Then I saw the ledger, and the ledger saw me. The charity treasurer, a man with a laugh like loose change, waved me over to a laptop by the registration table. "Quick approval," he asked. A spreadsheet glowed on the screen. Donor names, amounts, the usual parade. But a hidden tab blinked at the bottom, labeled with a single letter, T. He clicked it by accident, or on purpose, I couldn't tell, and there it was, a cluster of transfers, irregular and quiet, to a private account. The recipient field read T. Alvarez. I swallowed my gasp so hard it scraped my throat. "Looks good," I said, but my voice came out as if someone else were speaking through me. "Thought so," he said, cheerful. "Margaret will sign off." Of course she would. My mother signed reality. She authored the version of events that got printed. If money was flowing to Teresa, did that mean Mother knew? Was she paying her for silence, or for something else? I stepped back, the room tilting just enough to make the chandelier sway. The quartet finished a song that sounded like a door closing. Someone tapped a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll take your seats." The lights flickered, once, twice. Then the house sank into darkness, so complete that I could hear the group inhale like a single creature. Glass chattered against tables. A child laughed, then began to cry. Somewhere near the stage, my mother's voice cut cleanly through the dark. "Power. Now." My phone buzzed again in my palm. The blocked number. My thumb hovered. I answered, breath held, as the city's distant noise pressed its ear to our windows. "Hello," I whispered. A woman's voice, older, careful, threaded through the line. "Claire." She said my name like a lullaby wrapped in warning. I knew that voice. I didn't know how I knew. "Who is this?" "It's time," she said. "Check the box I left under your father's desk." Before she does, the lights surged back on. Gasps turned into laughter. The quartet restarted. I stood very still, the phone screen ghosting my face. I looked up and froze. My mother was already walking toward my father's study, a key shining in her hand. I didn't move. I couldn't. My mother's heels clicked like a countdown as she crossed the hall toward Richard's study. The key glinted in her hand, sharp enough to split more than a lock. I forced myself into motion, weaving through guests who laughed too loudly, who clinked glasses as if nothing trembled beneath the surface. My pulse hammered against my ribs as if it wanted out. If Margaret reached that box first, whatever was inside would vanish into the same abyss where all inconvenient truths went. But before I could reach her, Daniel stepped into my path. His hand brushed my arm with a familiarity that once felt like safety and now felt like fire. "You okay?" he asked softly. His eyes were too kind for a man who had promised forever to me and then handed it to Sophie. "I'm fine," I lied, my gaze fixed on the study door. "You don't look fine. Step aside, Daniel." For a moment, he hesitated. Then Sophie appeared at his shoulder, her expression taut. She slipped her arm through his, staking her claim, but her eyes flicked to mine with a flash of something else. Warning? Apology? I couldn't read it. By the time I broke past them, the door was closed. Locked. My mother had already gone inside. And if Margaret was inside that room, she wasn't just unlocking a study, she was burying a secret. I circled back toward the foyer, my face set in that polished, unshakable smile. I couldn't afford questions. I couldn't afford suspicion. Not yet. Instead, I watched. I listened. I waited. The gala unfolded like clockwork. Champagne towers, polite applause, laughter brittle as crystal. My father mounted the stage with Sophie at his side, his voice steady but his hands trembling around the note cards. He spoke of hope, of legacy, of a future brighter than any chandelier above us. Everyone clapped. Everyone smiled. But I saw it, the slight collapse of his chest as he stepped down. Like he had used the last of his strength on that single performance. Back at the registration desk, the treasurer's laptop had been abandoned. I slid into the chair, fingers quick. The hidden T-tab still glowed faintly. This time I dug deeper. Transaction after transaction, stretching back years. Large sums diverted quietly into Teresa Alvarez's account. Why Teresa? Why now? And then something new. A notification popped up, a bank transfer processed only hours earlier. Larger than the rest. My breath caught as I read the reference line. For Claire. Someone had been funneling money under my name long before I found that bracelet, but for what? Protection? Or a setup? I snapped the laptop shut just as someone cleared their throat behind me. Sophie. Looking for something, she asked. I straightened, forcing my heartbeat to steady. Approvals. Her gaze lingered on me, sharp and uneasy. Then she said almost too quietly, "You shouldn't dig where you don't want answers." What's that supposed to mean? But she didn't answer. Instead, she slipped away into the crowd, her hand brushing Daniel's as she passed. My chest burned with an ache I'd sworn I buried. Before I could follow, my phone buzzed again. Another blocked call. I stepped into the hallway, pressing it to my ear. Claire, the same woman's voice said. Steady. Familiar. If she finds that box, she'll destroy it. You need to be faster. Who are you? I demanded. Silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. Then, the truth isn't about who you are. It's about who you're not. The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my reflection ghosting back at me in the darkened glass. My hands trembled, my chest tightened. That's when a new sound cut through the air, my father's cough, harsh and ragged, followed by the crash of a glass hitting the floor. Guest gasped. Sophie shouted his name. I ran. Richard stood pale and swaying, Daniel at his side, Sophie clutching his arm. My mother appeared instantly, commanding the room with a single raised hand. He's fine, she announced. Just a little faint. But her eyes darted, sharp, toward the study door. And in that moment I realized, whatever was in that box wasn't just about me. It was about him too. The guests crowded closer, voices rippling with concern, but Margaret dispersed them with a single glance. She guided my father toward a chair, her movements smooth, rehearsed. It was the same way she had once hushed an entire boardroom of executives, swift, decisive, absolute. But I saw the crack in her composure when she leaned down to steady him. Her eyes flicked, almost imperceptibly, toward the study door. The key was no longer in her hand. I slipped away before anyone could notice, moving through the maze of silk gowns and tailored tuxedos, my pulse beating louder than the quartet's polished notes. The study door was ajar now, the light spilling out in a narrow slice. Inside, the room smelled of polished wood and old secrets. The desk was neat, too neat. Margaret had been here already. The box was gone, but not everything had been erased. On the floor, half hidden beneath the leather armchair, a scrap of paper clung stubbornly to the rug. I crouched, prying it free with shaking hands. It was torn, jagged at the edges, the ink smeared but legible. If she tells you, it will destroy him. No signature this time. My chest tightened. Destroy him. Not me. Not Sophie. My father. Claire. Sophie's voice drifted from the doorway. I turned sharply, the note clutched in my hand. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Her expression wasn't the smug defiance I expected. It was something heavier. You shouldn't be in here, she whispered. Then why are you? I shot back. Her gaze dropped to the note, then to my fist. Because I already know what she's hiding. My breath stilled. Then tell me. Sophie shook her head, tears threatening her careful mascara. You think you want the truth, but you don't. It doesn't just burn bridges, Claire. It burns the ground they stand on. I wanted to shake her, to demand answers, but before I could move, a sharp knock rattled the door. Daniel's voice, low and urgent. They're asking for you both. Now. Sophie brushed past me, tucking her arm around Daniel the way she had claimed him in every other way. But as she passed, she pressed something into my palm, a hospital bracelet. My breath caught. Not the one I'd found earlier. A second one. This one read, Baby Boy Har. I froze. 2 bracelets. 2 children. The gala roared on outside, laughter and applause vibrating through the walls, but in that moment I could only hear my own pulse. Later, long after speeches and staged smiles blurred together, I stood alone on the terrace, the city lights restless beneath me. My phone buzzed again. Another blocked number. I answered with a trembling hand. 2 bracelets, the woman's voice said. Calm. Certain. You've only ever been told half the story. Who are you? I whispered. You already know, she replied. And then, almost tenderly, don't let her bury your brother. The line went dead. The word echoed in my skull, brother. I had lived 32 years believing Sophie was my only sibling, that we were the fractured halves of one impossible whole. But the bracelet in my hand told another story, one that had been hidden in hospital drawers and family ledgers. I tucked it deep into my clutch before stepping back inside. The gala was dissolving into laughter, drunken chatter, the rustle of coats and car keys. Guests drifted out into the night with smiles bought by champagne. Only the Hartmans remained anchored, statues in the storm. My father sat pale in the corner, a tumbler of water trembling in his grip. Margaret hovered above him like a shadow that had learned to speak. Her hand rested on his shoulder, too tight, too possessive. He didn't meet my eyes. Sophie caught me watching. Her gaze darted to my clutch, then away. She knew what she had given me. She knew what it meant. Later, when the house had quieted and the staff retreated, I slipped into the study again. The room felt colder now, stripped of its performance. I searched everywhere, drawers, bookshelves, behind framed photos that smiled too perfectly, but the box was gone. Margaret had erased it, except she had missed one thing. Taped beneath the desk, nearly invisible in the shadows, was a second envelope. My fingers peeled it free, careful not to tear. Inside was a single photograph, a newborn swaddled in a hospital blanket, eyes shut tight, mouth open in a silent cry. The bracelet on his wrist matched the one in my clutch. On the back of the photo, in faint handwriting, for adoption. Never tell Richard. My breath fractured. Adoption. Hidden. My father kept in the dark. The floor creaked behind me. I turned. Margaret stood in the doorway. The light caught her face, softening her beauty into something colder, sharper. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. I held the photo up between us. Who is he? For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, softly, almost tenderly, The reason you were never meant to find out. Her words sliced cleaner than any shout. I wanted to demand answers, to shake her until the truth spilled, but footsteps echoed from the hallway. Sophie's voice, Daniel's low murmur, the rustle of movement. Margaret's gaze locked with mine, steel against steel. "If you love your father," she whispered, "burn it. Tonight. Or you'll bury him with it." She turned, leaving the door ajar, her perfume trailing behind her like smoke after a fire. I sank into the chair, the photograph trembling in my hands. My father had secrets he didn't even know. Sophie had given me proof she'd sworn not to touch. And Margaret had built an entire empire on silence. But silence wouldn't protect us anymore. I slid the photo back into the envelope and pressed it against my chest, a promise forming in the hollow of my ribs. If my brother was out there, hidden like a stain on the family name, then I would find him. And when I did, the Hartman legacy would burn. I didn't sleep that night. The photo burned in my mind, the bracelet pressing against my skin like a question I couldn't answer. A brother. Hidden. Forgotten. Erased. At dawn, I slipped out of the house and drove. The city was still half asleep, but the records office wasn't. Paper trails don't vanish, not completely. With enough persistence, you can stitch ghosts back into flesh. Hours later, I found it. Birth records from the week I was born. 2 entries, consecutive. Baby girl Hartman. Baby boy Hartman. No father listed. Mother, Margaret. My lungs froze. Twins. Sophie wasn't my only sibling. There had been another, but his line didn't end in adoption. It ended in a red stamp, deceased. Except someone had lied. Because clipped to the file was a hospital bill paid in cash, signed not by Margaret, but by Teresa Alvarez. I drove straight to an address buried in Teresa's old employment records, a modest house with paint peeling at the edges. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Finally, the door opened. A man stood there. My age. My face, but harder. Dark hair, sharp jaw. Eyes that felt like they'd been watching me long before this moment. "Claire," he said. He didn't ask. He knew. My throat closed. "You're—" "My name is Michael." His voice was steady, but there was pain threaded through it. "And you were never supposed to find me." Before I could speak, footsteps echoed behind me. Margaret's voice, sharp as broken glass. "Enough." I turned. She stood at the curb, Sophie at her side, Daniel just behind them. My father was nowhere to be seen. "Go inside, Michael," Margaret ordered. But Michael didn't move. His eyes stayed on mine. "Do you want to know the truth, Claire? Or do you want her version of it?" I looked between them. The brother I never knew, the mother I could no longer trust, the sister who had betrayed me once already. My chest felt like it was caving in. "Tell me," I whispered. Michael's jaw tightened. "I wasn't adopted. I was sold. To Teresa. She kept me safe. She raised me until Margaret took me back. She said I was a liability to the family name. She paid Teresa to disappear." My stomach turned. Why didn't anyone?" "Because," Margaret cut in, her voice like thunder, "Richard could never know. He thought you were his miracle, his one perfect daughter. If he knew there were 2, if he knew what it cost to keep you, he'd have walked away." Her words dropped like stones into the silence. Sophie's face was pale, Daniel's unreadable. Michael stepped closer, his eyes burning. "She's lying. Richard knew. He signed the papers. He let her bury me." "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, he wouldn't." But doubt coiled through me, sharp and suffocating. Margaret's hand trembled for the first time I'd ever seen. "You don't understand, Claire. Everything I did to protect you." "Protect." The word rang hollow. Michael's voice cut through the air. "She didn't protect us. She chose you." I looked at him, at the mirror of my own face, carrying scars I'd never had to bear. My whole life had been built on someone else's erasure. And in that moment, I realized the truth wasn't about who had lied, or who had signed, or who had buried what. The truth was about survival. I stepped back from Margaret, from Sophie, from all of them. My voice was steady when I said, "Then it ends tonight. No more silence. No more secrets. If this family burns, it burns with the truth." Margaret's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with rage. Sophie reached for Daniel, and he let her. Michael stood straighter, a weight lifting from him as if he had been waiting for this moment all his life. Somewhere behind us, a car engine started. My father's silhouette appeared in the window, his face half-lit, unreadable. Watching. He didn't come out. He didn't stop us. Because maybe Michael was right. Maybe he already knew. I walked away, the photo and the bracelet heavy in my clutch. For the first time in years, I wasn't holding my family together. I was letting it fall apart, and the silence that followed wasn't betrayal anymore. It was freedom.